They say the difference between failure and greatness is measured in seconds, the ones you waste and the ones you command. When the world sleeps, the 1% awaken, not for glory, not for applause, but to face the mirror and whisper the words no one else dares to live by, do it anyway. Because discipline is not motivation, it's war. A quiet war waged in the dark between who you are and who you're destined to become. Every hesitation costs you time. Every excuse buries your potential. And those who rise, those few who walk through the fire, they follow something ancient, something sacred. VO, pause, whisper. The discipline code. The world sleeps beneath a blanket of darkness. Outside, everything is still. The streets, the air, even the wind seems to hold its breath. But somewhere, in a quiet room lit by the faint glow of a desk lamp, a man sits awake. His pen hovers above a blank page. There's no music, no audience, no noise, just him and the voice inside his head that refuses to let him rest. He's not looking for motivation tonight. He's searching for something deeper, something colder. Discipline. This is the hour of the unseen, the hour when dreams die for most and are reborn for the few who understand the code. The discipline code isn't a routine or a slogan. It's a contract between your purpose and your pain. It's what separates the 1% from the rest. Not talent, not luck, but the sacred consistency of showing up when no one's watching. Every morning at this same time, he writes one line in his notebook: do what must be done, especially when I don't feel like it. It doesn't sound impressive. It's not poetic, but it's everything. That one sentence becomes his anchor, his law. Because true discipline isn't about energy. It's about obedience. It's about doing the necessary when the feeling is gone, when comfort whispers your name, and when no one will ever know whether you did it or not. Most people wait for motivation. They chase it like children chasing fireflies, hoping to capture that spark that makes them feel ready. But those who rise above mediocrity, those who live by the code, don't wait to feel ready. They understand a universal law. Action creates emotion, but emotion rarely creates action. That's why they rise before dawn. That's why they move in silence. They build momentum in the dark, while others sleep through their purpose. This unseen battlefield isn't fought in gyms or offices, it's fought in the mind. Every second is a duel between your weakness and your will. Every hesitation is a small surrender. Every excuse is a silent betrayal of your future self. The man at the desk knows this too well. He has failed before countless times. He has broken promises, given up early, looked for shortcuts. But today, he isn't chasing perfection. He's practicing obedience. Discipline is obedience to the higher version of yourself. It's an act of devotion not to rules or people, but to the person you were born to become. Every time you resist distraction, every time you rise early, every time you act with purpose, you are sending a message to your future self: I am on my way. Napoleon Hill once said, "The man who cannot control himself can never control anything else." That single truth sits at the heart of all achievement. Discipline doesn't shout. It doesn't crave recognition. It's quiet, repetitive, and thankless. Yet it's the foundation beneath every empire and every extraordinary life. It's built from the tiny decisions no one sees, the cold showers, the early mornings, the finished tasks, the controlled emotions. Each one is a brick, each one invisible. But together, they create something immortal. That's why the code begins in silence, because silence is where truth can't hide. In the absence of applause, you discover what's real. When there's no validation, you meet the version of yourself that either acts or makes excuses. The 1% have learned to live in that silence. They've learned to be alone with the truth of who they are and to use it as fuel. When the rest of the world finally wakes up, this man will have already written, planned, and built something real. While others scroll, he will execute. While others complain, he will create. While others think about changing, he will already be becoming. That's how the gap is created, not in a single leap, but in small, ruthless increments of consistency. The people you admire most didn't get lucky. They built their strength in quiet hours when no one noticed. They trained their minds to obey their will. And now, their results speak the language of discipline, a language only the few can understand. Because discipline, in its purest form, is freedom. When your actions obey your purpose, you no longer need to chase control. You are control. So when the clock strikes 4 and the world hides beneath its blanket of comfort and excuses. Remember, someone somewhere is already awake. Someone is already shaping the future you'll wish you had started building. Someone is following the code, the discipline code, and his silence will always be louder than your noise. There's a moment every morning just after the alarm breaks the silence when the war begins. It's not a loud war. There are no bullets, no banners, no spectators. It's quiet, internal, almost invisibly. It begins with a single thought. 5 more minutes. That's the voice of comfort disguised as kindness. It tells you to rest a little longer, to start later, to ease into the day. But deep down, another voice rises, the one made of steel and fire, and it whispers back, no. That word, small as it is the first victory of the day. And for those who live by the discipline code, it's the only victory that matters. Napoleon Hill often wrote that every man is both his own master and his own slave. What he meant was this: your mind will obey whoever commands it most consistently. If your emotions rule you, you'll live reacting to life instead of directing it. But if your will commands your emotions, then you become unstoppable, a living force of intention. The man who understands this has already separated himself from 99% of the world, because most people don't lose to others. They lose to the quiet negotiations they have with themselves every morning. The war within the will is fought not with swords, but with silence. It's fought in those small, unseen decisions when no one is watching and no one will ever know the outcome. Every time you choose the harder path, you strengthen your command. Every time you surrender to comfort, you weaken your sovereignty. Discipline is not an event. It's a vote cast moment by moment in favor of the person you want to be. The Stoics called this mastery over impulse apatheia, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to remain unmoved by it, to feel the pull of distraction and still say, I will stay the course. The strongest warriors in history didn't win because they had less fear or fatigue. They won because they refused to let those feelings dictate their actions. Discipline is emotional containment, the ability to stand still in a storm and act as if the sun were shining. There's a reason this war never ends. Each day, the mind tests your loyalty. It asks, will you still act when no one believes? Will you still push when no one claps? Will you still hold your standard when life feels unfair? And most people break. They lower their expectations to match their moods, but those who live by the code, the 1%, raise their actions to match their purpose. They understand that feelings are temporary, but standards must be eternal. The truth is, your emotions are not the enemy, they're the proving ground. Every frustration, every doubt, every moment of fatigue is an invitation to rise above yourself. That's the real battle. It's not against others. It's against the version of you that settles. And every time you overcome it, even in the smallest ways, you forge another layer of inner armor. Imagine 2 voices inside you, one born of desire, the other born of discipline. Desire says, do what feels good. Discipline says, do what's right. The stronger voice wins. Over time, whichever one you feed becomes your master. The tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives feeding the wrong one, letting comfort dictate their destiny while calling it balance. But the truth? Balance doesn't build empires, obedience does. Every person you admire has fought this same invisible war. Hill, Carnegie, Marcus Aurelius, Mandela, they all bled in silence. Their greatness wasn't born in the spotlight, it was carved in private moments of decision. When everything in them said stop, they whispered continue. When they wanted to complain, they acted. When they wanted to give up, they persisted. That's the code: simple, brutal, liberating. The man from the first chapter feels the weight of this truth every morning. There are days when his hands tremble over the keyboard, when his body aches, when his mind screams for rest, but he sits anyway. He writes anyway. Because he understands what most never do, that comfort is not peace. It's decay disguised as relief. Every indulgence weakens the edge of his will, and he refuses to live dull. So he wages war daily, not against others, but against the part of himself that wants to be ordinary. As he moves through his morning routine, everything becomes a ritual of resistance. The cold water against his skin, the blank page demanding focus, the weights that challenge his body. Each act becomes a statement: I am in control. And slowly the noise of the world begins to fade. He no longer seeks approval, applause, or acknowledgement. His satisfaction comes from the discipline itself, from the quiet pride of knowing that he is obeying his own command. There's a calm that follows this war, a silence that isn't empty but earned. It's the sound of alignment. When your actions, thoughts, and purpose move in the same direction, the noise of doubt disappears. This is the reward of discipline, not glory, not comfort, but inner order. The chaos of life doesn't disappear, but it loses its power to break you. You begin to see the world differently, not as an obstacle, but as a test. Every distraction becomes an opportunity to sharpen your will. In time, this daily war reshapes you. You stop expecting life to be easy, and instead you demand that you become stronger. You no longer wait for motivation, you become it. You don't fear failure, you study it. You don't look for shortcuts, you build endurance. That's what separates the 1%. They don't chase what feels good, they chase what's right. They follow their code even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because in that pain, something sacred happens. The weak parts of you begin to die. The soft habits, the lazy thoughts, the excuses, they burn in the fire of repetition. And what remains is clarity. A mind disciplined enough to think, act, and endure without collapsing. A soul capable of silence in chaos. A will forged in discomfort. That's the real reward. Not wealth, not fame, but command over yourself. Napoleon Hill said, "Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. If you do not control your thoughts, you cannot control your needs." This is the essence of Chapter 2, the war within the will. Every morning, the world gives you a choice, to obey your feelings or to obey your purpose. One path leads to noise, excuses, and regret. The other leads to power, peace, and legacy. And when you choose discipline, when you win that silent war, you begin to see what the 1% already know, that success isn't built in grand moments. It's built in invisible ones, in those small private victories where no one else will ever know you fought, but you will. Because that's what the discipline code demands, that you rise before the world does, that you lead your mind before it leads you, that you fight the war within the will, and that you never stop fighting. There comes a point in every disciplined life when progress stops feeling like progress. The days blend together. The routine turns into repetition. The fire that once felt like a calling now feels like a cage. This is where most people fall, not because they lack passion, but because they confuse boredom with failure. They mistake the silence of steady work for the absence of results. But the ones who rise above the 1%, who live by the discipline code, understand a truth so few can stomach. Consistency isn't about feeling alive, it's about staying loyal to what matters, even when it feels dead. Ruthless consistency is the law that separates the dreamers from the builders. It demands that you show up every single day, whether the world claps or not. It doesn't care how inspired you feel. It doesn't reward excitement, it rewards endurance. It's not about intensity, it's about identity. Because the disciplined don't act out of motivation, they act out of who they are. And who they are is unshakable. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success." But few understand the weight of that word persistence. It's not romantic. It's not cinematic. It's brutal repetition under the pressure of invisibility. It's doing the same ordinary task again and again, knowing it might take years before the world even notices. But that's what faith in your purpose looks like, walking forward without proof, trusting that the road will appear beneath your feet only when you've earned it. The man from the first chapter feels this more than ever. His mornings have become ritual, his work mechanical. The thrill is gone. There's no music in his routine anymore, just quiet labor. But this is where the real transformation begins. The human mind craves novelty, but mastery demands monotony. The body wants comfort, but growth requires repetition. The code demands sacrifice, and the greatest sacrifice of all is excitement. So he wakes again, writes again, trains again. The pen feels heavy, the gym feels lifeless, but he obeys, because he knows that greatness doesn't announce itself in the noise of achievement, it hides in the silence of repetition. Every act of consistency, no matter how small, is a brick in the cathedral of destiny. It may look like nothing now, but years from today, when others wonder how he built a life of discipline, he'll know the answer, one unremarkable day at a time. That's the secret. The 1% guard consistency is boring, But boredom is the crucible of power. The undisciplined run from it, the masters remain in it. While others search for stimulation, they stay in rhythm. Because they know that rhythm builds momentum, and momentum builds mastery. The Stoics called this praxis the daily practice of virtue and focus. They believed that excellence is not a single act but a habit, repeated until it becomes your second nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You become what you give your attention to." The man who gives his attention to the craft day after day becomes the craft itself. His work stops being something he does. It becomes something he is. Consistency is the invisible hammer that shapes destiny. It's not glamorous, it doesn't trend, but it's undefeated. The problem is that most people never stay with anything long enough to witness its power. They start strong, burn fast, then quit the moment the applause fades. But the disciplined, the truly ruthless, see quitting as blasphemy. To abandon your path halfway is to betray the code. Every time you stay consistent when it's dull, you are training your spirit to obey your vision instead of your feelings. That's how unbreakable confidence is built, not from quick wins, but from daily discipline. Because every small promise kept becomes a silent vote for your future self. Each one whispers, "I am reliable, I am real, I am ready." Ruthless consistency doesn't mean never resting. It means never stopping without purpose. It means even your pauses are intentional. It means you recover strategically, not emotionally. You don't collapse from burnout. You plan your recovery as part of the mission. Because to the 1%, discipline is not punishment, it's alignment. Every act, even rest, must serve the larger purpose. In this stage, the man's life begins to look painfully repetitive from the outside. Friends drift away. The noise of the world feels distant. But inside that quiet repetition, something magnificent starts to form a foundation so deep that no chaos can shake it. What looks like boredom is actually becoming balance. What looks like isolation is becoming clarity. He is no longer addicted to change, he's addicted to control. Day after day, he repeats the code. His pen touches paper, his breath steadies, his body endures. There's no reward in sight, only the faint sense of becoming someone who no longer needs one. And in that moment, a profound shift happens. Discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes identity. What once required force now flows naturally. This is the reward of ruthless consistency, to evolve past the need for willpower. When that moment arrives, you no longer chase progress, you are progress. The gap between who you are and who you're becoming dissolves. You stop measuring results by the calendar and start measuring them by your command over time. Consistency becomes your heartbeat, your rhythm, your silent power. The world begins to notice not because you asked it to, but because the results can no longer be ignored. The irony of this law is that it hides its magic in monotony. The days that feel most meaningless are often the ones that shape you the most. The small, disciplined repetitions done without excitement, without recognition, without proof, become the invisible architecture of destiny. The weak crave variety, the strong crave mastery. And mastery is born from the same act, done perfectly, endlessly, ruthlessly. The 1% understand this law instinctively. They don't wait for conditions to be perfect, they build under pressure. They don't need external motivation. They move from internal order. They are not driven by results. They are defined by rhythm. They live each day as if their life depends on it, because in truth it does. And so the man continues. He wakes, he writes, he repeats. Each sunrise no longer marks another day, but another opportunity to refine the code. The process that once felt heavy now feels sacred. Consistency has become communion, a daily conversation between his will and his destiny. And as he walks this narrow path, something inside him begins to whisper, "I am becoming the man I once dreamed of being." That's the law of ruthless consistency, the unglamorous, unending, undefeated commitment to becoming what you said you would be long after the feeling is gone. The code doesn't demand perfection, it demands persistence. And those who stay the course, no matter how ordinary their days may seem, will wake one morning to find that they've crossed the invisible line between wishing and becoming. Because in the end, greatness doesn't happen in grand moments. It happens quietly, in repetition, in patience, in the cold mornings and lonely nights. It happens when no one watches. It happens when you refuse to quit. That's where the 1% are born, not in the spotlight, but in the silence, in the relentless rhythm of showing up again and again until the code becomes who you are. There comes a point in every journey where the noise dies and all that's left is silence, a silence so deep it forces you to face your own breath. This is where most men fall, not in the battle, not in the chaos, but in the stillness that follows it. Because silence exposes what noise hides: your doubt, your fear, your fatigue. But it's also where the elite are forged. The 1% are not built in moments of applause. They are built in the hours when no one is watching, when the world has gone to sleep, and the only sound left is their heartbeat whispering, "Keep going." Napoleon Hill called it the testing phase of faith. The Stoics named it apatheia, mastery over emotional disturbance. Different words, same truth. The man who endures silently is the man who conquers loudly. When life strips you of recognition, of validation, of momentum, your discipline must become its own reward. This is the invisible contract of greatness: to persist without proof, to labor without praise, to believe without evidence. Every great empire, invention, or resurrection began with a man who worked in silence while others doubted his sanity. There's a story about a sculptor who spent 20 years carving a single statue. People mocked him, said he was wasting his life on one piece of stone. When he finally unveiled it, they were speechless. It was flawless, divine. But when they asked him how he endured so long without applause, he smiled and said, "Because I could see what they couldn't." That's the essence of the 1%. They don't wait for the world to notice. They work until the world cannot look away. But silent endurance isn't just about patience, it's about resistance. The 1% resist the temptation to quit, the seduction of comfort, the paralysis of overthinking. When the mind screams, "It's enough," they whisper back, "Just one more." That whisper, quiet but unyielding, is the sound of destiny turning its gears. It's the law of silent endurance, a sacred pact between you and the unseen future that says, "If I don't stop, it must unfold." Every night, the disciplined man dies a little to fatigue, to doubt, to pleasure. Every morning, he's reborn sharper, colder, more precise. The world calls it obsession. He calls it alignment. Because when you walk the path of the 1%, you learn to love the grind, not for the reward, but for what it transforms you into. The task becomes the teacher, the pain becomes the prayer, the silence becomes the forge. The Stoics taught that the universe hides its treasures behind suffering, not to punish, but to prove. So when you face resistance, when doors slam and progress slows, understand that's not rejection. That's refinement. The universe is testing your threshold. It wants to see if your hunger can outlast your hardship. Those who quit early never learn that suffering is the currency of success, and those who pay in full earn the rarest thing a man can possess: peace earned through perseverance. Discipline without noise becomes devotion. You stop doing it for results and start doing it because it defines you. The man who runs every morning, not for applause, but for alignment, has already won. The woman who works in silence, not for likes but for legacy, has already separated herself from the 99%. Because the crowd moves when motivated. The 1% moves regardless. This is why endurance matters, because greatness is less about how far you can run when the crowd cheers, and more about how long you can crawl when no one does. Every empire was once a man fighting fatigue in silence. Every masterpiece was once an artist ignored. Every breakthrough was once a believer mocked. But the difference between failure and legend is often measured by one thing: who stayed when everyone else left. You see, the 1% live by an unspoken vow to outlast the noise. They know that storms end, that pain fades, that mockery turns to admiration. So they keep building, keep walking, keep believing. Their faith becomes their fortress, their work, their worship. And when the dust settles, the silence that once mocked them becomes the echo of their triumph. Remember this: the moment you stop seeking validation, your discipline becomes immortal. You transcend the world's cycles of approval and rejection. You enter a higher order, one ruled by purpose, not popularity. That's the hidden door only the disciplined can open. The 1% don't rise because they're lucky. They rise because when everyone else stopped, they didn't. So when your journey gets quiet, when progress slows, when support fades, don't mistake silence for absence. It's not that nothing's happening. It's that everything is aligning behind the veil. The invisible forces of destiny only move for those who refuse to stop moving. This is the law of silent endurance. It demands everything but gives you everything back: strength, clarity, peace, and power beyond measure. And when the world finally sees what you've built, they'll call it sudden success. But you'll know better. You'll know it was never sudden. It was the long, unseen war, fought in silence, won in spirit. Patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. Napoleon Hill: every morning before the world awakens, the 1% stand before an invisible mirror. It's not made of glass, but of repetition. Every habit, every disciplined act, every unbroken promise reflected back at them like light on steel. This mirror doesn't lie, it shows who you really are when no one's watching. Because discipline is never proven in the public eye, it's revealed in the private hours, in the choices made when comfort whispers your name. Napoleon Hill said, "You become what you think about most of the time." But thinking alone is not transformation, action is. The 1% understand that the mind must be sculpted through motion, through ritual, through the discipline of doing what must be done, even when the fire burns low. The Stoics knew this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and the 1% take that dye and reinforce it daily through deliberate repetition. Discipline is not intensity, it's consistency. It's the art of doing one small thing with excellence every single day until it becomes sacred. It's in the quiet morning when you choose to rise rather than rest. It's in the decision to work when inspiration is gone. It's in the unseen act of keeping your word when no reward follows. Every time you obey that call, you add one more unbreakable brick to the foundation of greatness. Most people chase emotion. They move only when inspired, act only when motivated, speak only when confident. But the 1%, they move regardless. Their movement creates motivation. They understand that waiting for the right mood is weakness disguised as wisdom. A warrior doesn't wait for the storm to pass. He learns to fight in the rain. A disciplined mind turns routine into power, repetition into rhythm, and effort into identity. There's a hidden beauty in monotony, the kind that few ever see. The world tells you to crave excitement, to seek novelty, to chase constant change. But the truth is, mastery is found in the repetition that bores others. A monk repeats the same prayer. A blacksmith swings the same hammer. A musician plays the same note. Over time, those repetitions cease to be mere actions. They become transcendent. The ordinary becomes divine through devotion. And that's where the mirror never lies, because it shows both what you've done and what you've avoided. Every skipped day leaves a crack. Every excuse leaves a stain. But every repetition, no matter how small, polishes it back to clarity. This is why the 1% guard their routines like sacred relics. To them, the routine is not restriction, it's freedom. It removes the chaos of choice, the fatigue of indecision. When the body acts by ritual, the mind is free to expand. Think of the boxer who trains in silence long before the match. Every jab, every pivot, every drop of sweat is a quiet conversation with destiny. He's not training to fight the opponent, he's training to defeat his weaker self. That's the mirror of relentless routine. Each act of discipline is another round won against the inner enemy. And when the final battle comes, he doesn't rise to the occasion. He falls back on what he's repeated 1,000 times in private. The world mistakes discipline for dullness, but those who've lived it know it's the birthplace of power. Because while others seek balance, the 1% seek alignment. Their routine isn't about control. It's about communion, aligning body, mind, and spirit with their purpose. When they wake, they breathe intention. When they move with meaning. Even their rest is ritual. They've turned their life into a symphony of structure, and through it, they've gained mastery over chaos. This mirror of routine doesn't flatter. It demands truth. It asks, did you do the work? And the reflection answers with brutal honesty. No words, no excuses, no hiding. It's a sacred confrontation between who you are and who you claim to be. And for the 1%, that confrontation is daily, because each day they're reborn through repetition. You see, discipline is less about control and more about connection. The 1% aren't just disciplined in action, they're disciplined through it. They don't force themselves to act, they've become one with the act. It's no longer them doing the work, it's the work doing them. When that level of integration happens, routine becomes meditation. The grind becomes grace. There's a strange serenity in this kind of life, the kind where every day feels the same, yet each moment grows sharper, deeper, fuller. Because when you master your routine, you master time itself. You no longer chase days, you shape them. You no longer fear repetition, you embrace it as the rhythm of evolution. The 1% understand that the difference between mediocrity and mastery isn't one big act of brilliance, it's 1,000 small acts done with devotion. And if you were to ask them their secret, they'd tell you this: I did it again. That's all. I woke up and did it again. I focused when I didn't feel like it. I practiced when no one was watching. I stayed when it was easier to quit. The mirror of relentless routine never lies, and over time, it reflects something extraordinary transformation. So look into your own mirror. What does your repetition? What does your repetition say about you? What truth does your routine reflect? Because the disciplined man doesn't pray for greatness, he prepares for it daily. And when opportunity finally arrives, it doesn't surprise him, it recognizes him. It's the same face, the same reflection, the same unbroken rhythm. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Napoleon Hill: discipline without focus is like a river without banks. It spreads thin, loses power, and never reaches its destination. The 1% understand this better than anyone. They know that attention is the currency of achievement, and to squander it is to surrender. Every distraction, every fragmented thought, every moment spent chasing novelty is a betrayal of their purpose. The mind that cannot concentrate cannot conquer. And so, focus becomes their fortress, a silent, unyielding structure built to withstand chaos, temptation, and doubt. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Concentration is the secret of strength." But this is not just mental effort, it is a deliberate act of devotion. The 1% do not let their gaze wander. They do not scatter their energy across tasks, people, or trivial pursuits. They know that greatness is not about doing more, it is about doing less, but doing it better, deeper, and longer. The distractions of the world become mere noise. They learn to listen only to the voice of their mission. Every thought, every action, every plan is filtered through the lens of purpose. The man at his desk understands that focus is both sword and shield. It cuts away irrelevance and protects him from the weak impulses that lure others into mediocrity. While the masses are pulled in 1,000 directions by social media, opinion, and fleeting desire, he operates in stillness. He does not react to the world. He shapes it silently. This is the fortress of relentless focus, a place where clarity is preserved, and every act becomes deliberate. To maintain this focus, the disciplined must endure isolation. This is not loneliness, it is alignment. The 1% do not seek comfort in crowds or validation from others. They seek communion with their own purpose. The world may call them obsessive, rigid, or cold, but those labels are meaningless to someone who is constructing a legacy. Their solitude is sacred. It is in this space that the mind sharpens, the vision clears, and the will strengthens. Every morning, this fortress is reinforced. Rituals become the ramparts, repetition becomes the walls, and unwavering attention becomes the gate. When the mind threatens to wander, the disciplined return to their anchor, the task, the principle, the promise. They fight the seductive pull of multitasking and mediocrity because they know that divided energy is wasted energy. Excellence requires total alignment, body, mind, and soul, focused on one clear trajectory. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They believed that external events could not disturb a man who had mastery over his own attention. The 1% apply the same principle to the modern world. They do not allow trending distractions, fleeting temptations, or idle chatter to infiltrate their purpose. Their minds are fortresses because they are selective with their focus. What enters must serve. What does not is expelled without hesitation. This level of concentration creates results that feel effortless, even miraculous to outsiders. But it is not luck. It is deliberate, relentless discipline exercised day after day, hour after hour. The man who works in silence does not hurry. He does not panic. He does not chase external validation. Every act of focus compounds. Every completed task builds momentum. Every avoided distraction reinforces the fortress. Over time, these small victories accumulate into unstoppable power. The greatest deception of the modern world is the illusion of busyness. People confuse activity with progress. They measure value by volume, not by precision. But the disciplined know that real power is not in doing more, but in doing better. Focus allows them to operate at the highest level of efficiency. It gives them the capacity to see patterns, anticipate consequences, and act with strategic precision. While others are scattered, they are surgical. This fortress also guards against emotional turbulence. A scattered mind is a vulnerable mind. Anger, fear, doubt, and envy find entry through cracks in attention. But when the mind is disciplined, when the focus is relentless, these emotions lose power. They cannot disrupt clarity because the fortress is intact. It allows the 1% to operate in chaos as if they were in calm, to make decisions based not on impulse, but on principle. Even rest becomes purposeful within this framework. The disciplined know that recovery is not passive, it is strategic. Sleep, reflection, and solitude are all tools to maintain focus. They do not drift aimlessly. They do not surrender to the noise of relaxation. Their focus is a constant, even when their bodies rest. Energy is conserved, vision is preserved, and intention remains sharp. This chapter is not just about mental toughness. It is about constructing a life where distraction has no home, where mediocrity cannot intrude, and where the mind becomes a weapon of precision. The fortress of relentless focus does not guarantee that the path will be easy. It guarantees that you will walk it with purpose, clarity, and unstoppable momentum. Napoleon Hill said, "A man must learn to concentrate his thoughts upon a subject before he can advance toward a goal." But the 1% do more than learn, they embody this principle. They wake each morning with intention, organize their hours with precision, and act with a calm ferocity that leaves the world behind. Their focus is both shield and sword, sanctuary and power. It is the invisible architecture that allows greatness to unfold quietly, relentlessly, inevitably. To step inside this fortress is to step outside the ordinary. The distractions, the temptations, the emotional turbulence, they no longer matter. What matters is clarity, purpose, and devotion. Every act, every thought, every choice is a brick in the walls of your legacy. And when the world finally sees what you have built, it will not be sudden. It will be the result of relentless silent focus that no one else could sustain, and few could even imagine. The law of focus is simple, yet unforgiving. Protect your attention, guard your energy, and refuse to surrender to noise. Discipline without focus is powerless. Focus without discipline is fleeting. Together, they are unstoppable. The fortress of relentless focus is not just a tool, it is the foundation upon which the 1% rise, the framework that sustains achievement, and the secret weapon hidden in plain sight. Concentration is the secret of strength. Napoleon Hill: "Every path worth taking demands a price. For most, the price is obvious: money, time, effort, but for the 1%, the true cost is unseen. It is the quiet surrender of comfort, the abandonment of fleeting pleasures, the willingness to endure ridicule and misunderstanding while the world sleeps. This is the edge of unseen sacrifice, the razor line that separates those who merely dream from those who achieve. It is invisible to others, but indelible in the life it shapes." Napoleon Hill said, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartbreak carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But that seed will not grow without sacrifice." The disciplined understand that greatness is born not in comfort, but in the crucible of discomfort. Every early morning that feels too cold, every workout that drains muscle and mind, every task that feels tedious is an unseen investment in the architecture of destiny. And while others indulge, complain, and retreat, the 1% sharpen themselves in silence. The cost of mastery is not always visible to the outside world. No one cheers for the man who skips dinner to complete a project. No one applauds the woman who turns down a social gathering to practice her craft. No one notices the sleepless nights spent refining a skill or confronting personal weakness. Yet these are the hours where empires are forged, legends are written, and character is cemented. Unseen sacrifice is the hidden language of the extraordinary. Every choice along this edge carries weight. To watch the crowd indulge while you labor feels unnatural, even painful. The mind resists. Comfort calls you back to the familiar. Your body protests. The world whispers, why? But the 1% have learned to ignore the whispers. They see the invisible rewards that only time and persistence can reveal. They understand that each small surrender of ease is a deposit into a bank. No one else can see a vault of power, mastery, and self-command. Stoics would call this voluntary discomfort, the practice of facing hardship willingly, to prepare the spirit for inevitable adversity. To walk the edge of unseen sacrifice is to embrace hardship not as punishment but as preparation. It is the act of enduring before endurance is required, of strengthening before battle begins, of giving what is demanded before it is demanded. In this, the 1% operate not reactively, but preemptively. The man who rises at 4 a.m., who trains while others sleep, who sacrifices fleeting pleasure for long-term gain, understands the hidden rhythm of life. He knows that the world rewards those who can endure silently and persist unseen. While others chase recognition, he chases mastery. While others seek approval, he seeks alignment. And while others avoid the grind, he thrives on it, because the grind, unseen and uncelebrated, is the furnace that forges his legacy. Unseen sacrifice is also an emotional discipline. The 1% do not complain. They do not announce their suffering. They do not beg for validation. Pain is not a story for others, it is a teacher for self. They learn to convert exhaustion into momentum, frustration into clarity, and solitude into strategy. Every sacrifice becomes both a shield and a weapon, defending their focus while sharpening their edge. Every day presents small, invisible choices: to resist temptation, to finish tasks when the body protests, to hold the line when nothing seems to matter. These are the moments that define character. These are the sacrifices no one will notice, but every one of them accumulates. And eventually, when the world finally sees the results, it is mistaken for luck or talent. But the 1% know the truth. It is the relentless, unseen sacrifice, day after day, that built it all. This edge is not for the faint-hearted. It is a lonely place. Friends, comfort, leisure, distraction, all are temptations to abandon the path. Most will leave. Many will mock. But those who walk this edge understand that isolation is not weakness, it is refinement. The quiet suffering, the rejected pleasure, the unacknowledged labor, these are the currencies of greatness, and those who pay willingly gain an unshakable advantage over the unprepared majority. Napoleon Hill said, "Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. If you do not control your thoughts, you cannot control your needs." Unseen sacrifice is the application of that principle. Each denial of convenience, each persistence beyond comfort, each choice to act while ignored, trains the mind, conditions the will, and strengthens the character. Sacrifice is not punishment. It is investment. And the dividends are invisible to everyone but you until one day they manifest so powerfully that the world cannot deny them. The edge of unseen sacrifice is also an edge of transformation. Every act of restraint, every hour spent in focus rather than indulgence, reshapes identity. You are no longer a man or woman of convenience. You are a person who obeys principle over pleasure, who obeys vision over comfort, who understands that what you endure quietly today becomes the power you wield tomorrow. This is the silent law the 1% live by. And when you finally glance back, after years of labor, after countless mornings and nights of sacrifice, you see the truth. Greatness was never in luck, never in recognition, never in applause. It was in the invisible, relentless choices you made when no one was watching, when the world offered nothing in return. That is the law of unseen sacrifice, the bridge between ordinary and extraordinary, between desire and destiny. Most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. Napoleon Hill? There comes a point in the journey when all the repetition, all the sacrifice, all the focus converges into something greater, a summit not marked by applause or recognition, but by stillness, clarity, and command over oneself. This is the summit of inner mastery, where the 1% discover that the real battle was never with the world, but within. Every challenge faced, every temptation resisted, every early morning endured was preparing them for this moment, not as a reward, but as proof that they are no longer the person they once were. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But at this stage, conception and belief are no longer enough. The disciplined mind has been tempered by action. The beliefs of yesterday have been tested in the fire of reality, and only those aligned with truth and principle remain. Inner mastery is not merely thinking correctly, it is living correctly. It is the seamless integration of thought, action, and character, a unity that produces power so quiet it is invisible to the untrained eye, yet undeniable to the world. The man who once stumbled under distraction now walks with purpose. His routines no longer require effort. They flow naturally. His sacrifices no longer feel painful. They are part of his identity. The chaos around him may rage, but he remains immovable. This is not arrogance. It is equilibrium. Inner mastery is the balance between desire and discipline, between passion and patience, between ambition and restraint. It is the quiet authority that does not need to prove itself because it cannot be shaken. The 1% achieve this summit not overnight, but through years of incremental progression. Every act of ruthless consistency, every moment of silent endurance, every sacrifice unnoticed by the world, these were the rungs of a ladder leading upward. And as they climb, the summit becomes less a destination and more a state of being. It is a realization that power is not external, it is internal. Control is not over circumstances, but over self. Victory is not over others, but over weakness, doubt, and indecision. This mastery is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because the individual no longer depends on external validation to define worth. Every action is aligned with principle. Every choice reflects purpose. Terrifying because the world no longer defines limits, and with limitless potential comes immense responsibility. The 1% understand that mastery carries weight, the weight of decisions, of influence, of the quiet authority that can shape outcomes without uttering a word. The Stoics believed that virtue is sufficient for happiness, and the 1% live this truth. Mastery is not measured by possessions, accolades, or fame. It is measured by control over self, by the ability to remain steady when storms arrive, by the unwavering adherence to principle when temptation knocks. They have learned to become their own standard, their own compass, and their own reward. In this summit, there is no comparison, only calibration. No envy, only focus. No distraction, only clarity. Every discipline practiced, from the early mornings to the relentless routines, from the silent sacrifices to the focused attention, now manifests as effortless excellence. The man who once fought fatigue now harnesses energy. The woman who once struggled with doubt now embodies confidence. The chaos that once derailed them becomes the backdrop for their command. This is not perfection. It is mastery, a relentless, deliberate, and unshakable alignment of self with purpose. Inner mastery is also the birthplace of creativity and innovation. With the mind free from distraction, the spirit unburdened by indulgence, and the will sharpened by discipline, the 1% are able to see solutions where others see obstacles. They anticipate before the world reacts, they act before the moment demands, and they create before necessity commands. This is the unseen power of mastery, the ability to move through life not as a participant, but as a quiet orchestrator. Yet mastery demands humility. The summit is not a throne, it is a vantage point. From here, the 1% see the fragility of untrained minds, the fleeting nature of emotion-driven decisions, and the impermanence of recognition. They understand that every victory is temporary unless maintained, every skill fleeting unless practiced, and every advantage lost without vigilance. Mastery is a continuous journey, a summit with no final step, only higher perspectives. This is where the real reward of discipline is revealed. It is not in fame, wealth, or approval. It is in the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing, without doubt, that no circumstance can derail the trained mind. It is in the serenity of choices aligned with principle. It is in the calm authority that radiates from someone who has endured, persisted, and conquered themselves. The summit of inner mastery is quiet, but its impact is profound. And in that stillness, the 1% realize the ultimate truth. The code they followed was never about winning against the world, it was about winning over themselves. Every rule observed, every habit honed, every act of discipline was a step toward becoming unbreakable. And now, standing at the summit, they do not look outward for approval, they look inward for peace. They do not seek validation, they have earned self-respect. They do not fear the storm, they have become it, unyielding, silent, and eternal. Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle. Napoleon Hill, after every struggle, every early morning, every quiet sacrifice, there comes a moment when the storm subsides, not because the world has changed, but because the man within has. This is the eternal calm of the 1%, a state of mastery that is invisible to those who chase recognition and fleeting pleasure, yet undeniable to those who have endured the crucible of discipline. It is a calm forged in fire, tempered by focus, and solidified by relentless consistency. Here the mind rests not in complacency, but in quiet authority. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand." The 1% understand this principle, not as advice, but as law. They have acted when conditions were imperfect, persevered when recognition was absent, and endured when comfort begged for surrender. And now, standing in this eternal calm, they realize the reward was never external, it was internal. It is the stillness born of knowing that no matter the chaos outside, within them lies a fortress unshaken. This calm is the final chapter of mastery. It is not a pause from life, but a command over it. The 1% no longer chase outcomes because they have learned that outcomes follow action. They no longer fear failure because they have been refined by it. Every habit, every ritual, every act of unseen sacrifice has coalesced into a state of confidence so deep that the external world cannot disturb it. Their power is silent, their presence unspoken, yet every decision carries weight and every step is deliberate. At this summit, time itself bends differently. Days are no longer measured by distraction, by trivial achievement, or by recognition, but by alignment. Every act of effort becomes intentional, every pause becomes strategic, and every thought becomes a tool. The 1% operate in a dimension where the ordinary cannot penetrate. Life no longer imposes chaos, they navigate it with precision. The calm is eternal not because the world is still, but because the mind has mastered movement, thought, and desire. Stoics called this equanimity, the ability to remain serene amidst turmoil. The disciplined call it destiny realized. It is the state where fear, doubt, and indecision lose power because they have been confronted, tested, and overcome countless times in the hours no one saw. Every challenge faced, every temptation resisted, every day endured builds the foundation of this calm. It is not given. It is earned through relentless obedience to the discipline code. From this vantage, the 1% see life differently. They understand the transient nature of applause and the fleeting value of praise. They understand that comfort is temporary and that distraction is everywhere. And yet they are untouched because they no longer define themselves by externals. Their identity is forged in the quiet fires of self-mastery. Their strength is not a product of circumstance. It is a product of will, clarity, and relentless persistence. This calm is also a gift to others. The 1% inspire not by show, but by example. Their silent authority radiates power and stability. People are drawn to them not because they boast, but because they embody what others secretly crave: control over mind, body, and spirit. Yet they never seek to dominate. They simply live, and their calm becomes contagious, a quiet standard that elevates everyone who witnesses it. Every ritual, every focus session, every act of unseen sacrifice finds its ultimate purpose in this moment. The mornings that felt endless, the nights of quiet endurance, the repetitive grind of mastery, they were not trials, but teachers. Each taught patience, resilience, and perspective. Each sharpened the mind to act when it matters most. Each forged the eternal calm that now defines the 1%. And the beauty of this state is that it is endless. It is not victory in a single battle, nor success in a single project. It is an ongoing rhythm of life, a continuous, unbroken alignment of action, intention, and principle. It is where effort becomes effortless, sacrifice becomes natural, and discipline becomes identity. The 1% no longer wonder if they are capable, they know. Their calm is absolute, not because they have conquered the world, but because they have conquered themselves. In this final chapter, the man looks back at the journey, the early mornings, the repeated routines, the sacrifices no one noticed, the focus maintained against all odds, and he understands the ultimate truth. Greatness was never external. It was the cumulative effect of the choices he made when no one watched. It was the silent obedience to a code that demanded all and gave everything in return. The eternal calm is the reward of living the discipline code fully, consistently, and without compromise. This is the state the 1% inhabit. It is quiet, unassuming, yet unbreakable. It is invisible to the world but undeniable in its power. And it is the final promise of the journey that when discipline is mastered, when sacrifice is embraced, when focus is relentless, and when routines are sacred, the soul discovers its highest form, calm, absolute, eternal. Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle. Napoleon Hill,